Hurry up and wait. That's Colorado's vaccine plan. People over 70, get ready to wait. Teachers, wait. Frontline workers, wait. The timeline's becoming more clear after the governor created a free-for-all of expectations. Colorado's red flag gun control law is a year old, so we can tell you how it was used and how it wasn't used to take away guns in 2020. The people in charge of our roads got some federal cash, and they chose to spend it in a super non-flashy way. But that's cool. Flashiness is usually compensation for something that's lacking. Hey, speaking of, this is next. So there are people showing up at fire stations around Colorado hoping to get the vaccine. You can't get the vaccine at fire stations, but that's what happens when a state's vaccination distribution rollout is a confusing, ever-changing mess. The governor and the state health department are trying to temper expectations this week following last week's triumphant announcement that it was on to the next phase for 70 and older, teachers, grocery workers, other frontline employees. They now say that they expect that older Coloradans will be vaccinated by the end of February. Teachers and essential workers will need to get in line behind that. So much for Cherry Creek School's announced plan to vaccinate its teachers by March. Governor Jared Polis announced the new stage without informing health providers, and we have covered their scramble since to try and get solid information out to the public. Well, today the state health department is starting to give us some hard numbers. 2% of Coloradans have been vaccinated so far, a bit more than 120,000 people. A bunch of you have asked for daily vaccine number tracing, you know, like we do with the other metrics, and we're pleased that the state, starting today, has been sharing those numbers with you. 5,700 and some vaccines were given yesterday. Governor Polis talked with Meet the Press today about, among other things, the vaccine rollout here in our state. The governor acknowledged that there is tremendous demand for the vaccine here, and the issue is simply the supply.
What's going difficult is the erratic nature of the supply. We will get, half the numbers one week, more the next, and very little notice, Chuck, very little notice. We might have the order placed and a different number shows up, and it's really hard to plan to make sure every vaccine is put in somebody's arm right away when we don't really know the numbers until we get them.
Governor there wearing the official state uniform of the black puffer jacket. All Coloradans required to own one at some point in their lifetime. On Meet the Press, the governor also talked about that UK variant of the virus, which showed up in America in Colorado for the first time. It was in Elbert County. And the governor said that the state's lab testing, they believe, is enough to figure out whether the mutated version is what's driving increases in cases lately. The governor says it's not showing up like that. They've just got the one confirmed and one suspected. Tonight's next question comes to us from Penn. Penn saw news from out of state about healthcare workers refusing the vaccine, wondered if that was happening here, and perhaps if that's what prompted the governor to throw open the floodgates to a ton more willing people. So, Penn, you're right that an estimated 60% of nursing home employees in Ohio refused the vaccine. NBC News says that 50% of frontline workers in California's Riverside County refused to take it. So we know that there's some refusal out there. We're still pressing the state health department here for an answer to this question, but it does not seem that Colorado is tracking vaccine refusals the way that other states are doing it. Because the state told us there was one, like one person. They told us that Colorado's 279 vaccine providers can report vaccine refusals. It certainly does not sound like they are required to provide that number to the state. We're going to keep following up because logic dictates there has been more than one Coloradan to say no thank you to the shot. There are currently 911 of our neighbors in the hospital with COVID-19. That number is creeping down. 131 patients discharged or transferred in the last 24 hours. We're going to continue to watch hospitalizations because of the fact that positivity and daily case counts are clearly increasing. Positivity was just under 11% yesterday, pulling our weekly average over 8%, and new cases are still surging, 3,246 new ones yesterday. And you see our weekly trend line's been rising to more than 2,300 new cases a day. So it sure did seem that Democratic Governor Jared Polis was pressured into deprioritizing prisoners in the vaccine list by some conservative voices in the state, most prominently Republican District Attorney George Brockler. Well, now Brockler is out saying that he thinks that Polis overcorrected on prisoners. So if the governor happens to be listening, George Brockler would like you to move the prisoners back up a bit in the list. Brockler talked to our Steve Steger.
This fall, the state's draft vaccine plan had congregate populations, like prison inmates, above seniors and the medically vulnerable. Republican DA George Brockler criticized that decision in the Denver Post on November 29th and got a conversation going about it, prompting the governor to respond days later.
There's no way it's going to go to prisoners before it goes to people who haven't committed any crime. That's obvious.
The initial response from the governor when confronted with that bizarre prioritization was so over the top strong, so much stronger than I had even suggested.
The governor loosened that up a bit a week later when he released the plan, instead saying people would be prioritized on age and health conditions alone, not whether they're in prison. Still, the new plan goes against the advice of health advisors who suggest moving prisoners and other congregate residents up based on their inability to socially distance themselves. Curious about the motivation of the change, we asked for emails from the governor's office. We got a lot of blacked out text. The day after Polis's strong denial on December 2nd, the head of the Colorado Gerontological Society wrote to the state's chief medical officer, saying she was concerned about news reports about inmates getting vaccinated before vulnerable adults. The response from staff was redacted. The day before the new vaccine plan was announced on December 8th, a justice advocate emailed warning of rising cases in state prisons. Quote, "Gov doesn't seem to understand how serious the situation is," she wrote. 7 people died in prison last week from COVID. Responses from staffers redacted again. This weekend, the Washington Post noted the influence of Brockler's voice in Polis making this change. But Brockler told me today he thinks the governor took it too far, and he would prioritize prisoners above the younger, healthy general population.
One, the person who's 30 years old and outside of prison has the ability to make decisions that protect themselves from this virus in a way that those in prison who don't. And we do have a moral obligation to look out for the health of those people who we incarcerate, even if it's as a product of their own conduct.
An attorney for the governor's office told me those redactions were because what I was seeing was work product, which is protected from disclosure under open records laws. So I asked Brockler if he thought that prisoners should be prioritized higher than that healthy general population. Why not mention that in the original editorial back at the end of November? He told me today, Kyle, that he only had 600 words and he wanted to make sure he made his point that people like his 78-year-old father deserve a shot before any inmate does.
I hope the people at the state didn't print out all those redacted pages before they scanned them to you, because that's like $53 worth of printer ink that we paid for. Most importantly, Steve, did you get a new camera? Because that looks spectacular. It looks like a Spielberg film in your house.
I did get a new camera, and I think more than anything, it really brings out the Christmas lights that I've decided I'm going to keep up until when the stock show should have been. So I'm going to leave those up, and they'll look nice from now on.
See, it's like my wife always says, a compliment never hurts, even if you're wrong. Thank you, Steve. So Denver police today offering a bit more information to the public about how it came to be that an officer's personal gun was used in a killing last summer. There was no internal affairs investigation on this because Denver police say that there was no policy violation when a sergeant's personal AK-47 ended up being used by an accused killer. Michael Close is charged with using that officer's AK-47 to kill Isabel Thallis, June, in Denver's Ballpark neighborhood. Prosecutors say that he was angry that Isabel and her boyfriend had allowed a dog to relieve itself near his apartment. Close is good friends with a Denver police sergeant, Daniel Politica. Politica claims that his gun was taken from his place without permission. No DPD investigation of this because it was not a police-issued weapon. Thallis' mother says DPD's handling of the situation was quote-unquote disgusting. So it would seem that the big-wig Democrats in Washington, D.C. really like Colorado Congressman Joe Neguse, a rising star type of character, apparently. Second-termer is going to be one of just 4 Democrats who get to do the responding to the Republican effort to overturn the election in Congress tomorrow. Speaker Nancy Pelosi picked Neguse for the team. I'm curious, are there still Ted Cruz Republicans in Colorado? I ask that because the senator from Texas was texting Coloradans like crazy today. And you'll remember, Cruz swept Colorado's Republican delegates back in 2016 before Donald Trump called Cruz's wife ugly and said his father was a traitor, and then Cruz fell in line. Brings me back to my original question. Does Ted Cruz still connect with Colorado conservatives? I ask because he was blowing up their phones today, shaking them down for money, trying to fundraise off his doomed attempt to overturn the presidential election and keep President Trump in power. Now this coup of sorts is going to fail tomorrow, but the opportunities to raise money off the effort are very real. 2 Colorado Republicans in Congress try to plan and help with that effort to overturn the vote of the American people. Both Doug Lamborn and Lauren Boebert are on board with it. Congressman Ken Buck, he signed on to a lawsuit trying to help Texas negate the election result, but Buck has said trying to do it through Congress, unconstitutional. Colorado's new red flag gun control law did not lead to widespread gun seizures. We'll look at just how many times the law was used. CDOT got a fat stimulus check from the federal government. What they spent it on, at first, is a bit perplexing. That's next. Opponents of Colorado's red flag gun control law suggested that it was going to be used to seize a whole slew of weapons. Well, we've got the numbers from year 1 of that law, designed to temporarily take guns away from people deemed to be dangerous. And at this pace, all of Colorado's existing firearms will be seized by the year 4702, a mere 2,600 years from today. Marshall Zellinger looks at year 1 of red flag in Colorado.
Here is Colorado's red flag law by the numbers. In 2020, there were 111 cases filed in 24 of Colorado's 64 counties. A judge denied the attempt to take someone's guns away 39 times, about 1 in 3 cases. A temporary restraining order was granted 66 times, 3 out of 5 cases. That means a person's guns were temporarily taken away from them. Within 2 weeks, there would be a hearing to determine if a year-long restraining order was needed. A judge issued a year-long seizure of guns 47 times last year. One of those cases was in Denver in November, when Denver police told a judge that they wanted a Denver man to turn over his guns after making several threats to assassinate Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser. That Denver man, Bryce Shelby, signed the document agreeing to turn over his guns for up to 1 year. Denver police described those guns as 2 rifles, including one that may be an untraceable ghost gun, meaning a rifle without a serial number. In getting the judge to agree to the red flag order, Denver police described other threats to shoot and kill Denver Mayor Michael Hancock, Aurora Mayor Mike Kaufman, and the police chiefs of Denver and Aurora. DPD also described how Shelby met with an undercover FBI agent and drove by Weiser's house to scope it out. Denver police confirmed that the guns have been handed over, but no charges have been filed. Since the FBI is involved, we went to former U.S. Attorney for Colorado, Troy Ide, for guidance.
We've had civil remedies for a long time in our legal system, but not for firearms. This is a new world for us.
Help us understand. What do you mean you can take the guns away from someone, but it's not enough to charge them with a crime?
Isn't that amazing? But that's the world that we live in now. Federal investigations take a long time. I know from experience, and it could well be that this investigation is continuing just the way you would expect it to, and you can't read anything into it.
I'd explain that it's a federal crime to threaten to kill the president or to threaten to kidnap someone and hurt them.
But the U.S. Criminal Code doesn't have just a general threat statute that says if you make a threat, that's enough to charge someone with a federal crime.
I have a statement from the Attorney General which reveals more about why there are no charges. Weiser's statement says that after the investigation into the threats, he decided not to press for charges and that he felt that the extreme risk protection order was the appropriate way to go. I also reached out to the other 4 referenced, Denver Mayor Michael Hancock, Aurora Mayor Mike Kaufman, and the police chiefs of Denver and Aurora. No one wanted to comment on this, Kyle.
Man, that's scary stuff. Well, it certainly seems like in an instance like that, that's why you want a law like that. On another note, Marshall, did you see that Steve got a new camera for his house, and his shot looks a lot better than yours now?
Yeah, I'm going to get on that right away. At least, hey, let's baby steps. We're at least active, and you can see and hear every word out of my mouth. The camera comes after we, 6 months of this, perhaps.
Does anybody remember back from November, December, glitchy Marshall? Like every time he came on, it was like he was like doing the robot. Oh man, that was terrible. Thank you, Marshall. CDOT just got cash from the federal government. Maybe toss it toward the big I-70 project? Nope. Can I interest you in a barrier? And the most Colorado thing we saw today is up in the air, like the Broncos front office. Next. Congress did something that hasn't received a lot of attention. So just before the new year, Congress approved COVID relief and funding for transportation, including here in Colorado, funding that's about $150 million. So where would you spend $150 million on our roads? You're like, well, first the one outside my house, then the next one. So in the Denver metro area, CDOT set aside nearly $10 million of it to improve sound walls. Some of CDOT's commissioners had the same reaction. Huh?
The noise wall is a bit of an exception, and there's a reason for that, which is that most of the Region 1 projects that are on the in years of the 10-year plan are much larger. So, we can't build 270 with $10 million.
It's fair. It's just budgeting. CDOT's got that plan to widen Interstate 270. That'll cost $200 million. CDOT also wants to redo I-70 up at Floyd Hill. That's nearly $100 million. So you look at what you can afford. Sound walls on I-70 between I-25 and Wadsworth. It got bumped up the priority list because it was something within the budget that they thought could make a difference right away.
The latest winter storm pushing into Colorado tonight, especially around the I-70 mountain corridor. Folks taking it easy as that light snowfall continues to come down across the Front Range Mountains through the foothills. And then look at this, a bit of a rain-snow mix coming across the far eastern plains. Again, in the metro area, maybe a quick flurry, especially further to the south, but that's going to be about it. The winds, unfortunately, are with us. So we've been tracking 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts going along I-70 toward Burlington. Futurecast takes out all that rain, all the snow by early tomorrow morning. We are looking good, back in business with some sunshine, and that takes us throughout our entire Wednesday. That cold front pushed through, and that's what's helping to kick up the winds. It will cool us off just a bit tomorrow. In fact, daytime highs will be in the mid-40s for us. Stay in the 40s across the eastern plains with 20s up in the mountains. Right now, it looks like our next chance for snow on Saturday.
Sometimes the most Colorado thing you've seen emerges from the sky and drops right in front of you. A lot like your feedback does each evening. Both of those next. The most Colorado thing we saw today is an unexpected balloon festival in Erie. Beth was walking with her husband on Thursday when they spotted the hot air balloon landing in a park near their neighborhood. So they live close to the Fairwinds hot air balloon launch by Erie Lake. She says normally, though, they just kind of go up and away, and normally they don't get a chance to see them touch down up close. That's pretty cool. See Colorado, say hey. Use the hashtag HeyNext or email us at next@9news.com. I promise I read each and every one. Almost all of your feedback tonight is about the vaccine situation, when you can expect it, why the communication has been such a disaster. I want to read you a comment that my colleague, our director of reporting, Chris Vanderveen, posted tonight. He's covered COVID from the beginning. He says, loads of people over 70 have no idea where to get vaccinated, even after waiting and calling and calling and waiting. This is nuts. Teachers in Denver still have no idea when they might get vaccinated. Considering Cherry Creek already has a plan, what gives? This is a mess. It is a mess. You deserve better communication. We'll work for it here every night.